Welcome to the Irish Occupational Therapy podcast, hosted by me, Jen Trechek.
And me, Irene Rutledge.
This podcast is dedicated to exploring the world of occupational therapy, sharing the latest research and techniques and providing insights into the many ways that occupational therapy can help people of all ages live more fulfilling and meaningful lives.
Whether you are a practicing occupational therapist, a student of occupational therapy, or simply curious about this fascinating field, this podcast is for you. We'll be interviewing experts in the field, sharing stories from the front lines of occupational therapy practice, and providing tips and advice for anyone looking to get the most out of their therapy.
So sit back, relax, and join us on this exciting journey into the world of occupational therapy in Ireland.
Welcome to the directors of EcoSensory Therapy to the Irish Occupational Therapy podcast. You're very welcome, Claire Pemrick and Chris West.
Hi, thank you so much for inviting us.
So we're going to get started with a few questions, and we're going to go with you first, Claire. Can you just tell us a bit about your background as an occupational therapist, why you chose it as a career, and how it's evolved into what it is today?
Yes, my background to OT really started with my nephew, who had a lot of therapy because he had some early brain damage as a baby. And I was so inspired by seeing the difference between him not being able to move at all to being able to walk and crawl. And then eventually he was able to climb stairs and do lots of different things. So that was really what drew me to want to be a therapist. And I actually ended up working for the same charity that he received his treatment from. So I really have always loved working with children. I was lucky enough to work in the States for 6 years with children, early intervention, so toddlers and preschoolers. And then I got a place in an SI clinic in Manhattan, which I loved. So when I moved back to the UK, I was really determined that I was going to do sensory integration. And that's really where I am still, doing sensory integration and sensory attachment intervention.
Brilliant, Claire. Really interesting story. And what about you, Chris?
For me, I had the opportunity to work alongside an occupational therapist working in CAMS, and a bit like Claire in terms of feeling really inspired in wanting to work with young people who found it so difficult to connect and engage. And so I've worked with children across the lifespan. So did my training, worked in forensic psychiatry, and then went into working with children with additional needs, where I have been ever since. So I work in a secure children's home using both sensory integration and sensory attachment intervention in the work that I do.
Oh. So I'd be familiar with sensory integration and attachment, but the term ecosensory seems to be, I'm hearing it more and more, it seems to be a bit trendy, and I'm not fully sure what exactly ecosensory is. It ecosensory OT, ecosensory therapy? What is it? Tell us a bit more.
Okay, so really we kind of came up with the term ecosensory therapy. We were looking very much at the kind of therapy world, which is broader than OT. It's kind of a term. It's not registered as a term, so you can't be an ecotherapist per se, but there is training in that. And really one day I was kind of really thinking about my sensory integration practice and how it was all happening inside. Whereas when I go outside for a walk or I spend time outside, I just feel so regulated. And I just thought it seems a bit crazy that I'm spending all this time trying to develop an enriched environment, a sensory rich environment, when actually one of the most sensory rich environments there is nature. So with talking to Chris, we started to think about how could we start to develop some nature-based practice that had sensory in the core of it. So hence why it became ecosensory therapy. And it is ecosensory therapy. We have practitioners from all different disciplines. We have psychologists, social workers, teachers, and lots of other different people. We've had a garden designer who's done our training that had her garden at Chelsea this year. So it's been a really broad therapy practice, yeah.
So you're training different disciplines to deliver EcoSensory therapy.
That's correct. So we started to do it really to give ourselves confidence to taking our practice outdoors. What would it look like if we actually started to do sensory integration sessions outside? And as we started to do that and we started to build our practice, and then we were starting to take it to different schools and to different places, we realized that we had a lot of information that would be really helpful to develop as a training. And then almost by accident, the model appeared. The model kind of developed when we were trying to explain to a head of school what we were actually doing in these nature-based sessions. And then before you know it, this model just kind of created itself. And we called it the EcoSensory model.
Chris, can we find out what environments that you work in outside? Is it forest areas? Is it beach areas? Is it any outdoor area, or what sort of environments are you working in?
Yeah, really varied, as you were saying, Aideen, that there's that opportunity to use forest-based spaces, beach-based spaces. We've had individuals working in more of a park-type environment. We're really looking for more natural environments. So, you know, where there are sometimes restrictions in terms of possibilities, but ideally we're looking at the most natural environments. So they would be spaces such as forests and woods. But Claire, you know, and I, alongside Matt, very much in terms of the kinds of spaces that we use. You know, they can be really old woods, like the ones that we use in our immersive practicum in Leaf that we've got coming up in Devon this weekend, as well as, you know, the city-based park that is in Colchester, where we also do in Leaf, where it, you know, you wouldn't know that you were so close to a city because actually that sense of immersion that you get. So really anywhere where there are nature-based spaces, as well as how we bring nature inside as well. I was working with a group of Australian OTs this morning, and they were talking about how they were bringing nature-based pieces into the inside environments as well, and the flexibility that we have with nature. And we very much talk about being alongside, working with, you know, nature isn't something that we take from, it's that being alongside as co-therapists.
And when you think about your kind of typical clients, who benefits from EcoSensory therapy? Why are people coming to you?
Yeah, so typical clients range really, and those of individuals who come on our growing routes, you know, hear the different case studies. So each week we use case studies to describe those individuals that we've all worked with, because we all use EcoSensory therapy in our practice. So thinking about, you know, young children, supporting that sense of connection, thinking about adolescents, so certainly in the secure unit, working with adolescents and young people, as well as, you know, all the way through to adults as well. So there's a real range, because of course nature is for everyone, and the benefits of that we know are indisputable now.
So is it primarily kind of mental health concerns that people would be experiencing, or developmental or physical combination?
Well, as Chris said, you know, we're all natural beings. We've come from nature. So, you know, being in natural spaces improves our mental health enormously. So any kind of, you know, therapy sessions that are happening outdoors, we're already kind of supercharging them by having nature kind of help us as a co-therapist. But we also know that the natural environment supercharges things like our killer cells. So it helps us avoid things like cancer, it helps us with our sleep, it helps us with our mobility, it helps us with our heart rates, and all sorts of different areas. So we've had clients and therapists who've done our training that are really working within the physical health realm as well, because really being out in nature is good for your physical health as well as your mental health. And certainly your stress and your regulation and all those kind of areas just really supported by being out in natural spaces.
And nearly as a preventative measure for anyone to get out, it sounds like.
Absolutely. And what I would also say is, as the therapist, you're also getting all those amazing benefits. So, when we're out in a natural space, we will also get all those wonderful things that help us stay regulated, help our immunity, help our circadian rhythms, and all those amazing building blocks, those physiological building blocks. They're really hard for us to generate within a clinic environment.
Claire, could you have a think about recent weeks? Is there any standout session that you've had recently that you could share with us, just to give us the nuts and bolts of what that looks like for other therapists listening?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I've been working with a young adult now. She's 19, and she, when she first came to me, she had just come off a tier 4 ward, which in the UK is an inpatient mental health ward, and she'd been in there for 6 months. She had quite a lot of trauma from being on the ward, but also her mental health trauma that she'd already experienced. And when she came to me, I was kind of like, well, why do you want to come and do EcoSensory therapy? And her voice was, I feel the most in tune when I'm outside and out in the natural environment. She felt like it was very leveling. She felt very stressed every time she went into a clinic environment, because she'd been in an institution for such a long time as well, that brought up triggering memories. So we started with doing nature-based sessions, and we just did one this week, where now it's just really maintenance. But what's so wonderful about doing it in a natural space is that whenever she's feeling the same stresses and triggers, she can take herself out into those natural spaces, and she can automatically kind of get those results, those kind of affordances that she gets in nature, which she wouldn't be able to necessarily replicate if she'd been coming into an SI clinic. So we go into the forest, we set up a hammock, we bring out the stove and make a hot chocolate. And this is, within the EcoSensory model, we have a thing called rhythm, which is one of our elements. And this real ritual that we have every time that we go out in the forest helps her feel really safe and really regulated, and she recognizes what's happening next. And then I'm also trained in internal family systems, so I'll do some psychotherapeutic work with her, and she really loves using the natural environment as an opportunity to talk with metaphors about how she feels. Like, for example, once she said she felt like a sweet chestnut, prickly on the outside, but soft in the inside. So the natural environment really provides lots of opportunities for that kind of thinking outside of yourself and using the natural environment for metaphor. Yeah.
When you're talking there, it's reminding me of the Kawa model and the kind of Japanese way of understanding and bringing meaning into things.
Absolutely. And I think it goes alongside very well with that model. Yeah.
And Chris, there's yourself, Claire, and you've got Matt and Mercedes, I think, in the EcoSensory team. How did you guys all meet, and how did you come together, and how do you work together?
So Claire and I have known each other for many years. We met in our the work that we were doing as directors for the Sensory Integration Network, as it was then known. So doing some project work, thinking around supporting the members in that. And Claire said to me one day, I'm thinking about doing some forest bathing. And I said, oh, I'll come and do that with you. So off we went to the forest in Dartington. And then, and really we were thinking about how we would support other OTs, as well as other practitioners, to think about going outside in exactly the way that Claire has been talking about. And then shortly after we'd started to think about that, Matt joined us, and so Matt as a psychologist, so really thinking about how we drew together some different theories. And I think again linking in with what Claire was saying about the internal family system, how ecosensory therapy enables practitioners to really think about how they can incorporate their existing skills and knowledge into and weave, if you like, it into our ecosensory therapy therapy model with its elements, really. So we have ground and connect and rhythm that Claire's been talking about. So I think we each brought something unique to each of those elements as well, and the opportunity to think about the model and how we created a neurosequential piece. So yeah, that was our meeting of minds.
Yeah.
And did you write up that model and you know, evaluate it, or what was the process?
Do you want me to go? So we are in the process of publishing it as a book, which is quite exciting. So we're going through peer review at the moment for that. But we really, we just started, we really thought we were going to just write a one-day training for staff, you know, for other practitioners. And then of course, COVID came and we had to move things online. And as we started to write it as an online course and start to put it in that level of detail, we realized that actually there was so much research, so much evidence, so much that needed to be said, that it ended up being a full 24-hour course that we've put online, so people can access that. And then as soon as COVID finished, we got those practitioners out in the forest so they could actually really experience in a body-based way what it feels like to be in the forest. So it wasn't really meant to start as like we're generating a model and we're going to, you know, develop a model and teach it. But what we've been very lucky is that lots of people have really done our training. I think we've had 150 practitioners who've done our training so far, some from Essex University. So we did a whole module with and placement with 7 of the Essex University students, and we're presenting that at the Occupational Science Conference in August. And we use outcome measures regularly when we're doing our sessions. So we'll use things like the profile and mood scores, and that's one of the ways that we evaluate it. But we are, really lucky that some of our practitioners are really writing it up for us and starting to, you know, think about how we can publish that in more ways.
Do you know, are there any Irish occupational therapists using this model?
Yeah, so we're thrilled, and we're thrilled that, you know, practitioners around the world are using it, but we have some colleagues of all of ours using the approach in Ireland, and really embracing the fullness of the opportunity that brings them, working with children who've experienced adversity in their early years. So yeah, that's certainly just one of them, but we know there's a number of, you know, of therapists using it. So yeah.
And if for any of our listeners, if they wanted to access or find out more about EcoSensory therapy for their own CPD, what advice would you give, or how would they access?
Well, we have a regular Sowing the Seeds, which is our kind of introductory. We've used nature-based terms for all our different courses. So we have a Sowing the Seeds introductory talk that we do quite regularly, and that's free, and we advertise that on Eventbrite. We've got one coming up next week, but we've got 100 people signed up already, so we said that was enough. I know. And then, or they can go straight on and do our training, because you can just sign up online. We've got our Growing Roots training, which is online, and if you just go to our website, which is ecosensory.com, I think, or
EcoSensoryTherapy.com. Yeah.
And you can find all our courses that way. We usually ask people to have done the Growing Roots training, which is our online practitioner training, before they come on the immersive in leaf training, because we feel like they have to have a really good grounding of the model before they come and get the most out of that one day. We also recently did a talk for Grey Rock, a one-day introductory piece that I think they're going to host again soon.
So there's a mix of online first of all, and then in person.
Absolutely, yeah.
Can I just ask about again the practicalities? So do both of you live close to a specific location that you would carry out EcoSensory therapy in, or what way does it work day to day with appointments? And I suppose, coming from a clinic school setting, I'm trying to get my head around how it would look and how practical it would be to implement EcoSensory therapy.
So for me, I have a couple of spaces that I use, and spaces where, surprisingly, even though there's lots of other people there, we're able to find spaces where we can, be private. So in terms of thinking about confidentiality, and a sense of feeling, that private space. So where we can hang up hammocks and cook bacon sandwiches and all of those kinds of things. So I have a number, depending on where the families are, because I'm down in Devon, where I can, arrange to meet with a family. And I think, again, just the opportunity for that shift in power balance as well, that outside spaces bring. It's nobody's space because it's everybody's space. And that just that process, if you like, of starting the journey of walking towards where we might be hanging up a hammock or setting up the stove, already we start to see that sense of everyone feeling more regulated, because of course that's the impact, that's what nature has in terms of the impact on our nervous system, really. So those are the kinds of spaces. And I'm really looking, I'm really fortunate to have lots of big forest based spaces, so that's something that I regularly use. Claire?
Yeah, likewise. I have a forest that's local to us, that's got lots of little kind of windy spaces, so you always feel quite private, and we can find little spaces that we use. Usually the clients get very used to the space and they want to go back to the same forest. They feel very familiar. But what's so wonderful about being out in nature is it changes every week. So every time we go, there's a different thing out. There might be the wild garlic or the bluebells or the ferns, and even so it's the same space, it changes. And that's really helpful in terms of changing for the client. But I also am really lucky enough to have a beach hut. So I'm starting to do some more of my sessions at the beach. But it's really based on a client, what they like and what they enjoy. Yeah.
Is it always individual or families, or do you ever do groups with people who don't necessarily know each other, or they get to know each other?
Yes. So in terms of my client work, just because I'm mostly working with traumatized children, I tend to do, family and individual work. However, we've done a lot of group work so I've done the group work with the university, and especially helping them support their wellbeing team and how they might be using that in a broader space within the university. But also we've been doing it with teachers and doing whole groups with teachers. But we know a lot of our actual therapists who've done the practitioner training have set up like beach schools or equine schools, or where they are using it in a group basis, or people in mental health facilities who are using the therapeutic gardens but using our models. So people are using it in all sorts of different ways, and we do try to encourage those who are doing that group work to really share those experiences. Yeah.
And you mentioned equipment, hammock swings and stoves. Anything else in your toolbox that you take for an EcoSensory therapy session?
Yeah, I will always have a magnifying glass in my bag, because the children and young people, and indeed adults, but kind of looking at things. So I've always got that, and a compass, finding their way. So I had a dad and his son who, just immersed themselves in the experience of, finding out how to use a compass, little blankets to pop over the hammocks, string, because we might, trioty style, doing a little bit of weaving.
Seriously, basket weaving in this way, full circle. I love it.
Yeah, I feel it's important.
I know, yeah.
It's brilliant.
And that's really, and it links in really so beautifully with our different elements. So we think about create, we think about discover, we think about attend, so creating a den, or, discovering something. And really the equipment that we take, in the same way that we're working in inside spaces, depends, we've had, when we do our in leaf, we have aerial yoga swings, we've had hammocks hanging over rivers, people paddling. So kind of, imagine, it's literally like imagining an outside SI room in that way, and so much more in terms of, exploring nature and having that sense of, being at one with nature, really, in that way.
That's amazing. What kind of challenges do you tend to come up against, or do you find any challenges in being able to deliver your sessions?
Yeah, I think being an independent practitioner and running my own company, I think some of the kind of structural challenges I'm lucky enough not to come against, but I know that sometimes people find that their particular employers might have particular concerns about confidentiality or risk assessments. But we always do really thorough risk assessments before we take clients out, and we teach everybody how to do those. We also think about the confidentiality areas. Now, also the other thing is, you know, we're living in the UK and Ireland. It's not necessarily like tropical and warm all the time. So, I mean, one of the obvious, you know, difficulties might be the weather. So we like to try and take people out all weathers, because I think that's a really good way of doing it. But obviously in the winter, if it's getting dark a lot earlier, then we'll need to be thinking about different things. And also, we're not going to necessarily take clients out when it's blowing a complete gale or something like that.
I'm thinking Chris should have put thermal undies on her essential equipment list in the winter.
So yeah, it's a really good point, Jen. So I soon discovered fleecy covered, internal fleecy covered trousers. I don't like being cold. And I've been out in the forest in January. So during COVID, you know, we were out in all weathers as long as it was safe, as Claire was saying. And Claire would always say, you know, there's no such thing as bad weather, but, you know, just having the right equipment. So yeah, really warm equipment, and you're warm as toast.
For you guys, what's next for you've got the book coming out, and it sounds like you've got a huge amount of training planned. What do you see as the future of ecosensory therapy?
Oh, it's a good question. And you know, each time we kind of we a little bit take, you know, see where the wind blows. You know, we're going to follow let our seeds go whichever way the directions go. But what we found, we're getting more and more interest from universities and how we might include that in student training. We're getting inquiries around the globe. So we have a cohort of people who've trained in America. We've just recently had Australian OTs that are really interested in doing it. So we're also thinking about taking it and taking it to different countries and doing it in different places. So that's always really exciting. And I just think really just spending a lot more time feeling confident about sharing the value of being in nature, even if you're not doing ecosensory therapy, even if you're just going out for a walk, or you're just how can you just get that little bit of the benefits, the evidence base that's out there, you know, for your own regulations. So just helping people to think about that in their own, you know, everyday lives. How can they do that?
It's fab seeing all the research coming through, particularly around blue spaces at the moment as well. And the fact that you're on a beach, there's going to be so much more, I think, of the evidence to back up what we already know around the benefits of that kind of environment.
Yeah.
And also thinking about all of our OT models, like bringing the environment, thinking about the environment, being a bit more creative about the environments that we work in. So hopefully this will be inspiring for others listening.
Just one little thing to say on that is, you know, one thing we all have a responsibility about is, you know, ensuring that these environments are around for the next generations. And one of the things that we know from the research is that the more that individuals spend time, including children, but any individual spends time in nature, improves their nature relatedness, which improves their awareness of the climate and how we're going to support it in the future, but also improves their well-being in nature. So, you know, there's a little bit of how this can help us as a whole species, as well as the wider non-human world. You know, how can we support that in future generations and future years?
And do you include as well, you know, in your sessions, would you ever include animals or?
Yeah, absolutely. If people have family pets, I mean, I've had family pets in inside spaces, but certainly in outside spaces, you know, again, just because the opportunities for co-regulation, you know, for connection, for, you know, sometimes animals will do things that, you know, humans may be more reluctant to do, you know, that kind of just right challenge, that inner drive. So those core, you know, sensory integration principles that Ayres teaches us about, really, in the co-regulation piece, really coming from, you know, Claire and I, you know, working with Aideen Brannock around that co-regulation piece as well. So many opportunities to bring in, you know, others such as pets and, you know, animals that we see within the environment as well. And Claire, I know you've got a beautiful case study in, you know, one of our reflect modules, where, you know, somebody that, you know, you were working with saw a deer, and how that leads us to different places. So I think, you know, we, you know, as Claire was saying earlier, we are sentient beings and surrounded by sentient beings, and the opportunity to think about how we protect their environment and live, you know, harmoniously alongside them as well.
And can we finish off just with some more ideas around, you talked about bringing the outside in. So maybe for some people that don't have accessible spaces to work in, how could they bring EcoSensory or nature-based therapy sessions into the indoors?
Yeah, so, you know, we're thinking about our senses, you know, think about different ways that you can do that just based on your different senses. So could you put some nature smells in your environment? So we know that the woody smells, like cedar and eucalyptus and things like that, give us a lot of natural killer cells, and that's really good for our well-being. So using those, or different kind of aromatherapy like lavender. Also visually, we know that fractals, so the world's made up of, you know, all these changing shapes, and we can see it within a rose or a different pattern. We can see these kind of circular lines and different ways that these work. So bring in what the research has showed, that just looking outside a window in a hospital bed that looks at trees is going to improve your ability to come out of hospital so much quicker. So just having visual natural environments, and that even includes virtual visual natural environment. So having a screensaver, so it's a lovely forest or a sea view, that will help with your regulation. And I have little things like on my desk, I've got a couple of cones, so at any point I can hold those and feel those, and different people have different things that they like, but that just, you could have something in your pocket, a piece of lavender or a piece of rosemary or a cone or something natural that just gives you that tactile and, you know, maybe a scent experience as well, that just helps us regulate.
Love it. A few woven baskets around the place would not go astray.
Absolutely, I'm all for weaving.
I had a really interesting experience with a young girl that I was doing a piece of nature-based work with, and she was coming up to doing her exams, and we were like, how can we create the sense that, you know, Claire is talking about, the different smells, and you can get these little things where you know, just put a little bit of the essential oil on, you know, on like a, you know, something that you smell, and she took those into her exams, and again was able to connect back with that sense of being with her mum in the forest.
Thank you so much for sharing your experience. I mean, I really can't wait till that book comes out. I'm definitely going to be putting that on pre-order. We'll put your contact details in the show notes, so anybody who wants to look you up can follow your work. So really appreciate you sharing your experiences with us.
Thank you.
That's all for today's episode on the Irish Occupational Therapy podcast. We hope you enjoyed our discussion and found it informative and engaging. If you've any questions or comments, we would love to hear from you. You can email us at irishotpodcast@gmail.com or connect on Instagram or Facebook.
And remember to subscribe to our podcast so that you never miss an episode. If you found this episode helpful, please leave us a review on your preferred podcast platform. Your feedback is important and helps us to improve the show, so please do leave it.
Thank you for listening to the Irish Occupational Therapy podcast, hosted by myself, Jen Trechak.
And myself, Aileen Rutledge.
We look forward to sharing more insights and knowledge with you in future episodes. Until then, take care.